episode of HTC Talk. Today we have a special guest, Stef Hanson. Who's Stef Hanson? Well, if you don't know, you need to get more involved in the sport. She may not be a member of the club. She's certainly a big part of this sport. Stef, welcome to HTC Talk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So for those who don't know, I don't know where they've been, but maybe give us a bit of a rundown of who Stef Hanson is and how you got involved in the sport of triathlon.
Okay. So I started as but I started as a triathlete, and like every other triathlete out there, fell in love with the sport. I essentially hurt my back and was told I'd never run again. And I'm a little bit of I'm stubborn. And I don't like being told what I can and cannot do. So when I was told I couldn't run because of a back injury, I decided to do triathlon because that makes sense. And my sort of first real triathlon that I did was the Noosa Tri, and yeah, just fell head over heels in love with the sport. So just kept continuing with the sport, and then eventually that evolved into coaching as well. I was a personal trainer at the time, so it's a really obvious sort of blend of the different things that I enjoyed doing. I started commentating at some of the local races here in Melbourne. I was writing for a triathlon magazine on quite a few different topics, whether it be strength and conditioning, race reporting, interviewing athletes. And then I launched my own multimedia platform for women in triathlon to give them a little bit more of a voice and to, I guess, give them a platform that I didn't think they had quite to the same extent as men had in the sport. So, and that platform's WITSUP.
I certainly want to get into WITSUP and what you've seen in terms of growth and changes we want to get to in the future. But maybe just talk a bit at the moment about your experience as an athlete and as a coach. Has there been any guidance in terms of separate to men about recovery and about the concerns of recovery for women and how to best manage their body and particularly in terms of as we get older? I think from my experience, there's concerns at a younger age as women are developing, but also that as well as when they get older. Is there any sort of lack of guidance or misinformation about women and their recovery and how to best adapt to training?
A fantastic question. I'll answer it as an athlete to begin with. As an athlete, no, I didn't really get any different guidance to, what the men were doing in any kind of respect. And I mean, to be fair, I didn't go searching for it either because I myself didn't really fully appreciate or understand that. Obviously, I know there's difference between men and women. I understand that, but I didn't fully appreciate that there were a lot of differences in terms of recovery, in terms of loading, all of those kind of, in terms of hormones even, and how that affects women. And when I say hormone, like I used to think, oh, hormones, it's just about being in a pissed off mood. Like that's how I used to approach it myself. And I've learned a lot. I learned a lot about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when I had a bit of my body just stopped working. I had this kind of a breakdown, was not in a good place, and a lot of it came down to hormones. This is such a very quick overview. I'm certainly not an expert in this area, but from having kind of that breakdown, is where I learned a lot more about my body, what it needed. Sleep was one of those things I definitely needed. But I just really didn't appreciate how much hormones play a role, particularly in women, but also men, but particularly in women. So I reached out to the experts. I will give her a plug because I think she's one of the most incredible women in our sport, but probably one of the most untapped resources in our sport and in endurance sport as well, not just triathlon. Her name's Katie Gray. She's, we call her the hormone nerd, and I'll be completely honest with you, she got me out of the hole that I was in. I'm talking, I couldn't even walk to the coffee shop without losing my breath. Like my body was not in a good way. So to go back, when I was an athlete and I was racing a lot and, you know, racing competitively, doing really well, and my body was coping, but I was punishing it so much and not allowing it to recover, you know, whether it be after a session or when you look at like a 12-month period, I wasn't giving myself that off-season break. And I hurt for it and learnt a lot. So part of what we try and do as well with WITSUP is try and tell those stories in the hopes that we can get through to other athletes in the sport and catch them before they get to a place that I got to. And yeah, I think we're seeing every day people coming out with different stories and showcasing those very important differences between men and women when it comes to coaching, recovery, like I said, loading, all of those kind of things.
It certainly seems to be a bit of a mindset, even in an age group level, that being fatigued, being tired all the time is just part of being a triathlete. Because we do multiple disciplines and having to try cover everything within one, there's this idea that we're supposed to be tired all the time. So how do we shift that mindset to how to manage our bodies better and get that proper rest, and who should we be seeking out? You've provided one example, but how do we get that guidance of how to better manage our energy levels?
It comes down to education, but I think coaches need to step up. They play a much bigger role in this as well. If they're giving out training plans, this should all be incorporated into, it's a coach isn't just a training plan. A coach should be, whether it be sort of a mentor role, a management kind of role, it's all encompassing. But I think it's too easy to put your hand up and say, yep, I'm a coach. And, you describe just a generic training plan. And don't get me wrong, like I actually think that there is room within this sport and there's places in this sport for just some very stock standard training plans. And I think those plans sort of sit in the beginners, like just trying to get people into the sport and explaining, you swim, bike and run 2 times a week, things like that they do have their place. But as people get more involved and get more obsessed, because let's admit it, it's a very obsessive sport. It needs to come down to, re-educating the coaches. And then and you can't just sit at the coaching level. Like maybe we look above that as well. And who's giving out coaching accreditations? Triathlon Australia, for example. How much more education needs to start from the governing bodies to filter down through the coaches and then down into the athletes? There's a lot of work in the system that needs to be done, in my opinion.
Yeah. Awesome. Great advice, I think. I think that's across the board, though, not just for women, for men as well.
Oh, totally.
We have a hard-ass approach as well. But I think I was curious to know your views in terms of your experience within that. Just getting into WITSUP, I think we saw some, for those who didn't see it, there was certainly some coverage of Sunshine Coast on the weekend. Can you tell us a bit about the growth of WITSUP, how it came about, and what you're looking forward to seeing in the future?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start. It essentially started, WITSUP was born from when I was writing for the magazine. And it seems weird because I grew up not feeling like I was, not equal to, I grew up with 2 brothers. I'm a massive tomboy, clearly. My best mates were guys. I never felt like I was a lesser of a human because I was a woman. Like I never felt any of those inequalities growing up, which is why it seems weird that then I'd launch a women's platform. But I think one of the reasons is I wanted every other woman to feel like I did, that there was no difference in terms of, those inequalities. So when I went to the magazine editor back in the day and innocently said to them, because I just interviewed Caroline Stef, and it was like, my very first interview, and anyone who knows Caroline knows that she's just incredible, an incredible athlete. I was a big fan. I still am a big fan. We've since become really good friends. And I was so inspired by her. And I said to the editor, why? Because she wasn't on the cover. And I was like, we've just done this amazing feature. why don't we have this woman or women on the cover of magazines? And the response was, well, women don't sell magazines. And I was like, I just didn't understand it. And it wasn't a loaded question. It was just a very innocent, I don't get it. And then I quickly sort of learned from the conversation that I was never going to change their mind. And I didn't want to be a part of that. And I felt like I wanted to have a voice and give others a voice, which is where WITSUP was created. I think in triathlon, we're a great sport in terms of equality in prize money. We've got equal prize money in 99% of the races out there. You'd be hard pressed to find a race that doesn't have equal prize money, but there's still a few sort of floating around here and there. So we're lucky in that respect, but there's so many other, what am I even trying to think? There's so many other ways that it's not equal in terms of media coverage, sponsorship, exposure, all those kind of things. It's just, it's not equal, and it's still not equal. Opportunities is probably one of the most important things, that it's just not an equal opportunity for both men and women in the sport. So that's where it kind of grew. And over time, though it's gotten better, we're still not where it's equal. So we're still going to keep fighting every single day. And I think we've still got a long, long journey ahead of us to really get to a place where it's equal across the board. But that's okay. Things don't happen overnight. It's a cliche for a reason. They just don't, and you just need to keep pushing forward. I think the thing that I'm most proud of is that it's not just us who have stepped up to give women a voice. We've kind of brought other media outlets along with us, because they can't afford to be seen to be not doing the right thing, because they'll get called out. So yeah, what does the future look like? Fantastic question. No idea. Mainly because we're living in a really crazy world right now. And this is the question I've been asking myself for the last 6 months. What does the future of triathlon look like? What does the future of professional triathlon look like? What does the future of WITSUP look like based on those things as well? So we're in a real process of trying to, I guess, look at, yes, races we're still always going to cover, but what is it that inspires people to get into the sport? And it's not just races, it's the storytelling. It's, you know, those people who haven't had a voice in the past, and, you know, that pop up all over the world. You speak to any triathlete pretty much, and there's typically a good story behind them, typically speaking. So we, you know, want to uncover those kind of stories and, you know, take that direction, at least for a little while racing is still a little bit few and far between, and it just doesn't look like it used to. So yeah, we're in a real state of change and trying to roll with it and being flexible. And at first it was really scary, but now I've kind of turned the corner and I'm really excited about what that can look like, because change is good. Like, it's been shit, don't get me wrong. I hope I can swear on this.
Nah, it's all good.
It's been really shitty for a lot of people, particularly people in Melbourne at the moment. But I don't know, I feel like a shake-up is good. Eventually good will come out of this, but I know not everyone feels like that right now, and that's okay as well.
Yeah. What one or two positive things have you seen over your time, and what, if you choose one or two things to see change in the future, what would they be?
Oh God, you're asking me the big questions. Oh, this is just like a casual chit chat. Like, what's the stupidest thing you've done in triathlon? I'm like, I've got plenty of those. What are two things that I've seen change? Was that what the...
Yeah, so maybe start off with one or two things that you've seen in your time that's been positive in our sport, particularly, say, looking at women in the sport, and then what in terms of moving forward you'd like to see.
I mean, I guess the response probably hits both of those questions. I've seen a change in coverage. which is fantastic. Like I sort of alluded to, that others have had to come with us. Otherwise, you get a little bit punished if you don't. So I guess I'm glad, and I'm not just saying that it's us, but I do honestly feel like we've played a big part in making those changes, and, making others accountable for not doing the right thing. So I feel like that's been a really good sort of evolving change, but also it needs to keep evolving and changing and over time. So yeah, I mean, that's not really specific, but it's hard because it's not just about all right, we need to get, I can't think of anything else at the moment, but let's just say prize money, for example. We need to get equal prize money. Tick. It's not just about ticking that one box and go, all right, sweet, we're done. It's this constant evolution about changing a culture, changing language, which is part of that culture. Recognizing that women, while, some of the best, like Marinda Carfrae's, she's doing great in the sport, but once you start going down, the line of athletes, it gets harder and harder to become a professional triathlete. But when you go down in the men's field, that reaches a lot deeper in terms of what they can do. I would love to see in the future, I think one of the biggest issues is sponsorship. For example, bike companies typically will give more money to men. And that is what it is. And it shouldn't be like that. Because it's that old school thought of men sell magazines, men sell bikes. And it's like, well, I'm not so sure that that's correct. And how do we change that? And if you don't change it, things will never evolve. You can't just keep relying on those old school thoughts and expecting any kind of change. So that's why it's important for me to keep giving exposure to all the women and showing that they can make a difference within this sport and inspire not just men, not just women, but men as well. I'm really actually one of the proudest things with what we've done with WITSUP is we've got a fantastic male following. Look, we've got so many men. We call them supportive dudes. It's something that I was really, I really wanted to make a statement at the start when we launched that this is about women in triathlon, but not to the exclusion of men. In terms of, I know men that are interested in women in triathlon, whether that be pro triathletes, whether that be their wife, who they've been wanting to get involved in the sport. So, no idea if I answered your question, but there's my little tangent for this morning.
That's all right. Just touching on that, you talked about men being supportive. How much of this lack of growth possibly for women in sport has come from men versus women? Just to look at, say, AFL, for example, it's been a long time coming to see women be considered professionals in AFL, but it's still well below of men. As you say, we might know the top, say, 2 females in AFL, where you'll know probably the number 100 player and possibly even draft picks for the men.
Yeah.
I might not necessarily think that we are in the same gap in triathlon, but is it coming from the men's side or is it coming from women not supporting women? Like, where do you think this is coming from?
You've got some great questions. It's both. And I've actually just been talking about this recently, that it can't always be women flying the flag and, jumping up and down and doing all the hard yards. We need men to come along with us as well, to help and stand up when they see something that's not quite right, and stand up. It's not that women need men to come in with their Superman cape. I say that because this very kind of thing happened to me the other day. And it was assumed that I was just this poor little girl that needed rescuing by a man. And I'm like, no, mate, I need your support, but I don't need you to come and save the day. Work with me, not talk over me type of thing. Yeah. And I pulled him up on it, and he was fantastic because his intentions were pure and great and all came from a good place in his heart. But I was like, I don't need you to just come in, save the day, walk back out again. Like, work with me. Let's fly together type of thing. Yeah. you know, part of the issue as well is, I think, like, especially in our sport, on every different level, whether it be, let's just talk about sponsorship, because I think it's a really good, it's a good metaphor for everything else. We're all after this tiny bit, like everyone wants a little bit of the pie, you know? So people tend to like push others to the side because they want that tiny bit. There's not much really to give. And I feel like that is a real barrier in order for everyone to evolve and grow. And women can do that to other women as well, which sucks because we all just need to support each other for the entire sport to move forward. And I'm not saying that every woman does that, but you can I reckon I've done it in the past as well. I've been a bit like, well, I need to get that in order to achieve what I want to achieve, and forget what the bigger picture is sometimes, which is just about evolving the sport and getting more women involved. So I think that's really important. Everyone sort of supporting everyone else can only have a great benefit on the entire sport. And that's what we've got to remember. That's what we're trying to do. So I don't know. I think everyone needs to kind of step up a little bit, but it's hard because you step up and you speak out, and you, at one point or another, you're going to get hammered for it. It happens, and it's hard. It's really, really hard. I'm very tired. But
and I'm sure many others are very appreciative of the work that you are doing and the positive changes that we are seeing within the sport. I want to come back to sort of your experience again, just in that you're now a mum, still involved in a sport that requires a lot. How have you found the change of becoming a parent and managing all that?
When people talk about mum's guilt, I had no idea what they were talking about. And I was like, whatever. Motherhood has surprised me in so many more ways than I could have ever imagined. In one way, I knew that I was going to love my kid, obviously. But I had no idea how much I would love just being a mum. We have so much fun together. It's not always easy, but I just love hanging out with my little mate. And she's just an absolute ripper. And I love that I can, you know, I've run my own business from home, and we still get to hang out, and I have that opportunity. Again, it's not easy, but I would choose that any day over going to work in an office, you know, 9 to 5. Not that we can do that now anyway. Everyone's working from home. But, you know, I was really surprised just how much I really thought that I would, you know, give birth, and, you know, you'd have the couple of months of being in your own little bubble, and then I'd be gagging to get back on the bike, or just, you know, really wanting to get my own space. But I actually never felt like that, which really took me by surprise, to the point that it's actually become a little bit detrimental to me, I believe, because I haven't put myself first in terms of health and fitness. And it is very much a part of me, but I haven't prioritized it. And I get frustrated with myself because I preach to everyone else how important it is to look after your mental and physical health, because it allows you to be the best person that you can be, which is then going to be, you can be the best mother that you can be, or father, or what have you. But I have found it really hard running my own business, being a full-time mum as well. This is when my husband Brett was working, and he's not anymore. And then, yeah, triathlon or thinking about racing just wasn't, it wasn't a priority. But I'm currently right now, I'm really trying to get back to those basics of just trying to stay fit and healthy. Because at the end of the day, I'm exhausted, and it's not because she's a nightmare. It's just because I don't have the stamina that I used to have, because I'm not fit and healthy. I'm not a slob or anything, but I just, you know, I need it for my physical, but probably more so for my mental health. And I need to prioritize it, but I'm finding it really, really hard to make it a priority, because there's just always something to do. Especially I think when you work from home, because your computer's always there. The office is, you know, my wine room and dining room, like it's right here. So yeah, I mean, I'm open to any kind of tips and ideas that anyone might have out there.
I was going to ask, do you have any strategies in place to help you manage all of that, and particularly that guilt that you talk about? I don't want to be, I think it might be a bit of a general, I'm not a father, so I don't really know how that feels, but I think it's a bit more innate in mothers, and probably have more of that guilt of, their time going into their training or into, their mental health, and, giving it a bit of space between their kids. But what's your thoughts in terms of any strategies that you're using that's helping?
I'm honestly going back to some real basics, to when I was a personal trainer as well. And so when I was a personal trainer, I wasn't dealing with motivated people. They were there because they felt like they had to be there, but doing anything outside of that half hour, 1 hour session, they had zero motivation to do it. So I was like, what can I tell them to do to try and keep themselves going? And a lot of the times it came down to working with other people. So I'm just trying to tee up walks, rides, runs with friends. Friend at the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And just honestly, I've been really open with my husband and saying, I need your help to get me out the door, because I'm not prioritizing it. So it might be as simple as a family, we're going for a walk run. And he's one of those annoying people who may not have run for 6 months, but can go for a 10K run. I'm not. I need to build back into it. So he'll walk and run with Frankie in the pram. We've got our dog as well. And I'll go off and do my little run and then run back and walk. And so I'm talking very, very, very basic. And I've got a few key mates who know that I'm struggling just with motivation and to get out the door. And so they'll check in, shoot me a message, can you ride this Friday? And I'm like, yep. So if I've committed to that, I will do it. It's so basic, but that's what I need right now. I don't need particular sessions. I'm not motivated to race. I'm not, when I don't feel fit, I don't feel competitive, or, I don't feel like I want to race. When I'm fit, I may just be the most competitive person out there.
Yeah. Certainly, I think keeping it simple is going to be beneficial. It's probably also a case by case. Everyone's going to have their different things that it suits for them. Some people might like that real firm structure of saying these are the sessions. Some people may find that too stressful and need a little more flexibility. Everyone's going to probably be a little bit different, and they need to find what works for them. How do we support women in terms of like grassroots level? So we talked a bit about professionals in terms of growth. But just in terms of how we can best support women who want to get into the sport, those who are, possibly now have young kids, what changes can we see in terms of best getting new participants?
I think club levels are just a great way to look at things in general, club and grassroots level, and making the sport just more inclusive, breaking down those barriers, and it's kind of a stock standard answer, break down the barriers to make it easier and more accessible to women. And it could be anything from educating about riding bikes to bike mechanics. It could be as simple as, I don't know, providing, a lot of women might feel nervous about joining a club that's very male dominated. So finding sort of small pockets within the club that make it feel like a safe environment to join, at least like a starting point. And then, they start to immerse themselves and transition into the entire club. Speaking to women, asking them, using them as your focus group, talk to them. I would love to see more people transitioning from just, say, running into triathlon. So what's the big difference between running and triathlon? Running, you just throw a pair of shoes on and you get out the door. Triathlon seems like this overwhelming 3-sport. It's all too crazy to even start. So breaking down those barriers, it doesn't have to be as expensive as, everyone talks about in terms of bike bling and all that. Like, it's great and we all love talking about it, but that can be off-putting to people who are not heavily involved in the sport. So having those conversations, educating coaches about exactly what we started this talk about, was the difference between men and women, and just them knowing that there are those differences, and the way that they approach. I mean, and that's a coach's role, regardless of men and women. Every athlete is different, and I think you said that throughout this chat at some stage as well. Everyone is individual, so really sort of honing in on how to speak to those different individuals. There needs to be more women in leadership within the sport, because that flows down and flows up as well in terms of, making changes and recognizing things that perhaps men in the sport don't recognize. And I need to reiterate that triathlon is ahead of so many different sports. I'm in the middle of learning a lot more about cycling, and we're doing it easy compared to cycling, that's for sure.
I think part of that is because we're actually quite a young sport. We started, I think, around 77, 78. And then we sort of hit mainstream, early 80s. So we're quite a young sport, where you look at a sport like cycling, it's got a long, long history. And I guess it's similar, like what I was talking before about AFL, when it becomes a one gender sport for such a long period, you're having to change a tradition within a sport, where I think we have that opportunity for growth, because we are quite young and we haven't got quite the same sort of, idea of what it is to be a triathlete.
Yeah, you nailed it. We are such a young sport, and I think it's a real opportunity for us to set an example for other sports. So I really think that that's a fantastic step for us to be able to take. When you look at things like, say, cycling, or actually let's look at the AFL, the men's and women's AFL. I think the AFL have done a great job in launching their, do we call it AFLW or the women's AFL now? Because that's all sort of in the middle of being changed, and I can't remember what we're up to now.
I think it's still AFLW. So it's been AFL, which has been the historical name for the sport, and that being the men's league, and then it's AFLW, which is the separation, which has been why do we have AFL and men's league and women's league?
Yeah, exactly. Or AFLW, AFLM. You're never going to change that. But but yeah, it's I look at that, and unfortunately you still hear things like, oh, the skill level's not as good, and I don't want to watch women playing footy. And it's such an old school of thought to be thinking like that, because the thing is, the skill level isn't up to the skill level of the men's AFL, because they haven't been doing it as long. There's no resources put in comparison into women's AFL. So it's going to take time. So it's about re-educating and allowing people to recognize that, they've had to go to other sports to poach people to come and play AFL women's. AFL men's has been around forever, and we all grew up kicking. I grew up kicking the footy, and I would have loved to have played AFL women's, but it got to whatever age it was, and that was it for me and footy. My dad was so disappointed, because out of myself and my two brothers, I was the footy player. I was the footy star when we were growing up. But I never had that opportunity to take that anywhere, really. And I think the key word in all of that is opportunity. So you not only have to create the opportunities for women to get involved in sport in general, but you also need to make sure that those opportunities can be seen, because the opportunities may be there, but if people aren't aware of them or don't recognize them, then it's kind of pointless.
Just thinking in terms of our club, like I think in triathlon, it's generally around a 30-70 split. We have about 30% participants of women versus men.
Yep.
Fortunately, I think for our club, we're about a 50-50 split. So we have pretty even distribution between men and women. And we do have women on the committee. But I think we could still give that voice and allow more opportunities for them to feel heard. Maybe we think that possibly as a club that's evenly distributed, that we're quite even with everyone getting a voice, but maybe we can find better ways of making sure that everyone feels that they do have a voice and are able to contribute and feel supported within our sport. I guess we'll finish off today with any final thoughts that you have, or anything that you'd like to share, or any ideas that you've got coming forward with WITSUP that's you want to promote or anything at all?
I mean, I guess for us, like I sort of alluded to before, we're really trying to look at different ways to tell stories and inspire people that doesn't always just relate to racing. So that's what we'll kind of be doing in the future. We've got some plans, but we're just kind of waiting a little bit to see what the world looks like, particularly Victoria, in the next few months. As far as saying anything to anyone who might be listening, if they haven't tuned out yet, I think one of the most important things, particularly with this pandemic at the moment, is to remember why we love this sport. So remember that it's not always about getting to a race start line. While we all love racing and being a part of that, it's a fantastic, weekend of racing. Take the watches off, take off all the data and all that kind of stuff, and just go for a ride, just go for a run. When you can swim again, just go for a swim, and remember that that's actually why you fell in love with the sport, was just sort of getting through those 3 different disciplines. And obviously it being a social thing and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I feel like we can really get caught up with punishing ourselves and trying to, and it's great. We've all got to have goals and it keeps you motivated. But every now and then, I think it's really important to switch all that off and just fall back in love with swim, bike and run.
I think that's a great point to finish on. It's something that I'm having to remind myself of. I'm quite competitive and like to push the limits and like to race. But just that pure joy that I remember of, when I was 15 of, just being able to swim, bike and run. And as you said, it was back then, it was quite a, basic sport. I think it was $25 like to do a race, and you'd rock up in your togs and just swim, bike and run. And it's sort of become bigger than Ben-Hur now with all the gear. I think we can just go back to the simplicity of just enjoying it, because that's what we like to do. The idea of triathlon was, we grew up swimming, cycling and running. They're very basic things, things that we grew up doing generally. And we do it because we love it. And I think that's a good point to finish on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Stef. Hopefully we get to see a lot more of you in the future. If anyone has any, wants to find out more about yourself or WITSUP, where can they go?
Just head to witsup.com. That's the hub of everything that we do. And thank you so much for having me and asking some really good questions. I was impressed.
If anyone knows me, I'm always like deep and meaningful, always trying to find a deeper level to any conversation.
You can tell. It's because when you text me, you're like, oh yeah, we'll talk about how WITSUP started. And I was like, yeah, okay, I can tell that story. And you threw me a little bit. I liked it. I love it. Deep thinker.
Right, well, maybe we'll actually see if we can do a 2.0. Maybe when we've gotten through a bit of this current environment, and we can see what the next stage is in terms of our sport and the next stage.
Yep.
Forward to it. Thanks, Stef.
Thank you.
See ya.